Hi. So it's June 8th. I'm on chapter 5 of my book, The Phoenix and the Falcon. If you remember last time, we left Helena in quite a bad place. It was a hard chapter for me to write, but if you recall, Helena was in a village on the steps of the Aral Sea, and she had been marooned there basically. And she had a nice life, a gentle life where she was considered, valued as a woman. And she goes to this very primitive village, and she's just basically chattel and forced to marry the the head of the tribesmen, the head guy who was quite a bit older than she was. And it was a really horrible life. She was very young, and after this, she has a boy, and his name was Mikhail. It was the only thing that was keeping her going, except for maybe this hope maybe that somehow, some way she could be found to get home. And so in the middle of the night, this very tall, blonde Ostrogoth, who happens to be quite good looking, comes along and says, "Oh, they're Huns," and warns the village they need to fight. And he, but as it turns out, she recognizes that he's an Ostrogoth and that they're allied with Huns. And so she tries to shout a warning. All hell breaks loose, and in the fray, Kansbar, who's the head of the village, son, attacks one of the Huns and draws blood, thereby exacting what they would call the blood price. So Helena runs. She gets on her old horse, this Arabian stallion, Pasiel, and her mare, and she flees. But unfortunately, she's followed by the worst of the worst. This Agrelia, who's, as you might have figured out, is the villain of the piece, and he murders her son, and she can't save him. So, but right before he's going to do his worst with her, Valamir, the tall Ostrogoth, rescues her, but she's just shattered. It's like and then he asks her, "What is your name?" And she tells him, and he speaks to her in Greek. So this is, Greek. She's on the steps of the Aral Sea, or the Aral Sea, and so she says her name, and then he says that he had come for her, that to rescue her. He had heard there was a reward, and so her freedom, rescue came, but at the cost of her son. But then he says, I would have kept you safe if you had not run. So, where is the responsibility? So, anyway, so we're on chapter 5. So she's just shattered, and so, oh, and of course, this book is available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. And also, I am a bookseller on Amazon. So if you look for a collectible, you can get a signed copy from me at a good price. Okay, so chapter 5, mounted, Valamir and Helena wove their way deliberately across the steppes in the bright early morning sun. Pasiel and the chestnut mare followed at a walk, snatching an occasional mouthful of the long grass. Except for the strident sounds from the village, the morning was tranquil. Warmer air blew from the south. Birds called. Small animals foraged for food. Helena felt twisted inside out. Her soul was rancid. She could not understand how the land could be so calm after the horror of Mikhail's murder. Something should share her pain. In the distance, the migrating antelope continued to forage. The wind blew, buffeting the swaying grass, oblivious to the fact that her world had been torn asunder. On the ground ahead of them, her dagger reflected the brilliant sunlight. As they approached, Helena saw Mikhail's head. Sliding from the roan stallion, she rushed toward it. "Wait," said Valamir, intervening, restraining her with his arm. with his hand. He strode ahead of her. As in a trance, she watched him wrap in leather what had been the essence of her son. His task complete, he placed the bundle in her hands, but kept possession of the dagger. She did not care about the weapon. She cradled Mikhail's remains next to her heart. Helena spoke to him as if he were still alive, scarcely aware when Valimir placed her on the horse. He led the horse with easy strides, his long hair swaying as he glanced in different directions, searching for what was hers. In short order he saw the small leather satchel, brown against the wind-swept grass, and changed course to retrieve it. After a hasty examination of its contents, he extracted a coarse blanket from it and wrapped the woolen cloth over his shoulder, and draped the woolen cloth over his shoulder. With methodical attention, he strapped Helena's nondescript pack to the mare and leapt back on the roan stallion. In the distance, blackbirds circled, silently floating downward. Helena urged his horse to a gallop, and Helena returned to the world. She saw the birds and moaned, understanding they came from Mikhail. "Hurry," she whispered to the earth, to the wind, but not to the man behind her. As the horses approached the corpse, Helena's animals snorted with fear. The roan did not react. As Valimir went to retrieve the small body, Helena was beside him. She sank to her knees, sobbing. In silence, he wrapped the remains in Helena's old blanket from her satchel. Shrieking, the carrion birds flew off toward the village. As Valimir lifted the forlorn bundle, Helena reached for it. "No, we must find a quiet place for him," he said. She stared wordlessly. "How should we prepare him for his journey?" he asked. She spoke in Persian to herself. "No, how could this be? He sleeps, and I have lost my way out of a dream. Helena, you must attend to your son." She stared, trapped in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was hushed. "He'll need a fire to cleanse him. It must burn hot, but wood is hard to find on the steppes." He nodded, his eyes revealing relief. "I'll see to it. Give me what you hold. It's better that he be carried as one." With reluctance, she relinquished her sad burden. He extracted some straps from a slender pack hanging alongside his horse's saddle. When he approached Helena's mare, Sorel danced away in fear, pulling hard on the lead line. Valimir spoke quietly to the animal, calming her. He fastened Mikhail's remains to the mare's back. Sorel snorted but did not try to bolt. He stroked her neck, calming her, and efficiently checked her makeshift halter. Lifting Helena to his horse, he mounted behind her with an easy leap. As he galloped north away from the village, she didn't resist Valimir's arm encircling her waist. Though her eyes were open, she was oblivious to her surroundings. Her thoughts were centered on Mikhail. The wind kept drying her tears, but could not keep pace with the flood from her broken heart. When the horses slowed to a trot, she came out of her deep reverie, to the sight of at least 300 tents, not the promised quiet place. Far from abandoned, the area was a hub of domestic activity, with women and older men working at their chores. Feelings of betrayal overwhelmed her. Without premeditation, she reached into her pocket for the remaining knife. Throwing her leg over the roan's neck, she tried to escape. Valimir held her tightly. With anger, he demanded, "What are you doing? You've taken me to your camp. This is no place for my son." The knife was in her hand, ready to stab his restraining arm, yet she could not use it against him. She hesitated and then turned it to her own stomach. Quietly, his hand covered hers, forcing her to release the weapon. For the first time, his voice sounded weary. "You have a responsibility, Helena. This is not the time to be weak." "Damn you." Ignoring her outburst, he pulled her to a more secure position on his horse. She wanted to bite him. His very decency was an offense to her. Somehow he had eluded being her enemy from the beginning. She needed her hatred to find the will to live. Yet in truth, nothing mattered anymore. Her life was in ruins. Her rescue was a bitter mockery. Her long-cherished hope had become a horrific nightmare. As they neared the encampment, grief swallowed her anger, leaving emptiness. Had choice been possible, Helena would have returned to the bleakness of the village, if only to have Mikhail again alive in her arms. Their entry at camp attracted attention. People looked at Valimir with respect mingled with surprise. Evidently, no one had expected him to arrive before the others. A white-haired man, bright eyes lively and a creased face, hobbled with a pronounced limp towards the Goth. He bowed with deference, almost formality, and then stood, awaiting orders. He showed no fear, only interest in Helena. As his blue eyes probed her face, she resented his curiosity. Valimir spoke in cordial Greek. You look for a story, old friend. We found Helena great wealth, losing none of his men. He looked tired, Valimir. I am Karatapan. A village fool attacked Grelia. You can imagine the rest. The servant shook his head. Remember, young master, worry about what you can change. Leave the rest to your gods. Valimir laughed. Young master, only you after all these years think of me as young. To a man in his 50s, 26 is young. He pointed to Helena. And who is she? She's the one you told me about. The tale was true. There was a son, but Grelia killed him. She wants a great fire for the child's last journey. His eyes widened in surprise. A pyre? I heard that Balusastram kept the old ways, defying the Magi's interdiction. Of course, most Zoroastrianism now believe that to burn the flesh is a contamination of the fire, the sacred light. He murmured more to himself than to them. He scrubbed his forehead. But in the end, who knows which belief is closer to Zarathustra's word? Karatapan, we'll talk about this later. The day has been long. Of course, Valimir, my apologies. If she wishes, I could build a tower of silence. A dakma instead of a pyre, and her child would replenish the earth through birds, wind, and the sun. May I speak to her? Could I ever stop you from doing what you please? Karatapan shrugged non-committedly. As he spoke in Persian, his eyes were gentle. You are with friends, Helena. I'll tend to your son as I would my own. Tell me what you need for him. At the sound of her birth language, her face crumpled. You know my name. She shook her head. It was all too much. Somehow she kept the task at hand. Build him a pyre. Not understanding Persian, Valimir interrupted in Greek. Do whatever she wants. Just find a spot where it's quiet, well out of sight of the camp. Karatapan bowed again, hurrying away without further conversation, his limp more evident than before. Valimir shouted after him, Ride the pack horse, Karatapan. With a smile, the servant turned and waved as he disappeared into the maze of tents. Valimir clucked to his mount, cantering the stallion through the rows of tents. The two other horses fanned out to the right, forcing several people to jump out of the way as they passed. At the northern edge of the encampment, apart from the others, Valimir halted before a large leather tent. He slid from his horse. His movements were stiff, betraying his fatigue. At the stallion's reins dropped to the ground. The roan waited patiently, without being told, not even grazing. Reaching for Helena, he lifted her down, then stepped back a pace. I must set your hand. Her mouth twisted into a grimace. It doesn't matter. Leave it as it is. His eyes glinted angrily. Exasperated, he said, You have no choice. Sit in front of my tent and wait. I must see to these horses. Without a word, she obeyed. Legs crossed under her long dress, she stared straight ahead and stared at nothing. She cried silently. The tears wet her cheeks, but did not touch her agony. She watched Valimir care for the horses because she did not have the energy to look away. He existed in her space and time, but was not real. When his hands unfastened Mikhail's corpse, Helena buried her face in her arms. Still upright, she fell asleep and dreamed. Huns mounted on horses pursued the villagers, running them down. Chaos surrounded them, but she could neither move nor speak. Ivan ran towards her, holding his own head in his hands, asking her to put it back so he could see. She screamed, waking from the nightmare. When she opened her eyes, Valimir was beside her. She wrung her hands and gasped from pain. Her right hand had begun to swell. Come inside with me, Helena. She shook her head, overwhelmed by his closeness. He was a stranger, a man. Trust was inconceivable. The idea of being in a tent with him, alone with him, terrified her. Beyond her fear, she felt dreadful, every muscle tight with pain. She was past exhaustion. Her body began to shake. Valimir picked her up and carried her inside. Its interior was gloomy, muted, illuminated from sunlight streaming in from the entrance and an opening in the sloping roof. The smell of well-used leather was pungent. He leaned her gently against a wooden pole, the tent's main support. Turning away, he rummaged through an oblong leather container. Her trembling increased, making sitting impossible. She slid to the grass floor and crossed her arms over her chest in an attempt to regain self-control. His back to her, he poured something in a cup. The sweet fragrance of wine wafted in the air. Again his muscular arms were around her, and he helped her to sit up. "Drink this," he said. It was not a request. Underneath the sweetness of the wine, Lena tasted a bitter flavor. When she had drunk all of it, he moved her to his sleeping pad. In the back of her mind, Helena understood that she should run, but she was too weary and weak to move. It seemed a lifetime ago when Ivan had been kicking her on the ground. Grelia's attack was too present in her mind. Her exhaustion was total. Vladimir lay beside her. He covered them both with a warm blanket and used her body to warm her. His hands did not wander. As she felt the heat emanating from him, her shaking lessened. She slept, this time without dreams. Upon waking, Helena discovered that her hand had been rebandaged in a way as to render it immobile, possibly reset. Though still covered by the blanket, Vladimir was no longer beside her. She heard him singing by the fire as he prepared a meal. The sound was of ancient Thrace in the days before Rome. The sound soothed her as her injuries drew her back to sleep. Voices broke into her slumber. Opening her eyes, Lena understood from the shadows the sun had shifted in the sky. Hours must have passed. Vladimir and another man were talking outside, speaking Greek. As she listened, her left hand clutched the warm blanket, finding comfort in it. "Thudamir, what happens sickens me. Give me a fight with soldiers, not a slaughter of children and women. It's without honor. Vladimir, you know the traditions. He gave you his trust. Such thoughts are disloyal." Realizing that she held her breath, Helena exhaled deeply. In a different way than Grulia, she held Vladimir responsible for Mikhail. She looked at her surroundings, not wanting to hear his scruples. The tent was Spartan, well equipped with essentials, but without luxury. Using her left arm for support, she sat up. Though her body no longer shook, sleep had not diminished her physical agony. Vladimir had left her a wooden bowl filled with meat and water in a crude cup. Thoughtfully, he had remembered to leave an old bucket, obviously a slop pot. She forced herself to take care of the natural need, but weakness made the effort formidable. Helena returned to the sleeping pad, breathing hard. She felt sick inside and shivered. Trying to stop the renewed shaking, she wrapped the blanket tightly around her shoulders and focused on slow, deep breathing. Calling upon her guardian spirit, she prayed for strength. Often, her grandfather instructed her in times of trouble to call upon her Pravisi, the spirit who watched over her from birth to death. His keen blue eyes had twinkled with joy when he reminded her of Zarathustra's words found in the Gathas. He had taught her that within all humans dwells Sharosh, the ability to hear the divine voice through one's conscience. It had quieted her thoughts and tried to listen for guidance from Ahura Mazda, from the Creator. She heard nothing save the beating of her heart, the noise of the camp outside, and the wind across the steppes. A twig snapped in the hearth, and she sighed. She thought about the ritual planned for Mikhail and consoled herself that at least he would receive the proper death rites. Ignoring her protests, Kansbar had buried her grandfather in the ground, sacrilege to the ancient ways. Unlike the Medes, Baluchistan believed that the sacred fire would purify the remains. Pulling the blanket tighter like a shroud, she cried, but again the tears brought no relief. As the men's conversation continued in their accented Greek, she listened, running from grief. "Vladimir," Thudamir said, "don't you see? The traditions are necessary. The tribe's very survival depends on them. People tremble with fear at the Hun's very name. Their terror saps their strength." "Empty words, Thudamir. They don't change how my stomach feels when I see dead children murdered for no reason." "Children grow up to be enemies, Vladimir, just as Attila says. You can make yourself believe anything if it suits you. I fight other men, A life taken in battle has honor. Killing women and children is not the same. He paused before adding, Attila knows how I feel. Thudimir was silent. Finally he asked, was he angry? No, he valued my honesty. The name Attila continued to trouble Helena, but she could not remember why. Without thinking, she drank. As she swallowed the clear liquid, she was ashamed. It was not decent that she could drink, even breathe, Mikhail dead. Dropping the cup, she lay back on the thin pad. You didn't tell him about our mother, did you, Valimir? You forget. He was there with us. It was right before Rugliva sent him to Rome, but no, I didn't speak of her. What would he care? She's been dead more than 15 years. Thudimir made a noise of exasperation. Her death festers in you to this day. You wouldn't worry about strange women and children but for her. Your memory makes you weak, keeping the blood tradition from your heart. Bevian, Valimir said, apparently using Thudimir's childhood nickname. You don't know what they did to her. You didn't see our beautiful mother after they had finished. His brother's voice was compressed. In truth, Valimir, I can't remember her face. You were 12, I was only 6. Helena felt no pity, but an obscure exultation. At least someone else had suffered. The world had been cruel in its indifference, not pausing in its commotion for a heartbeat to acknowledge Mikhail's loss. Except for her, no one cared. Thudimir argued with his brother, the manservants smiled and waved, women washed their laundry, and as always, the wind blew across the steps. When will you let me see the woman you kept? I won't, little brother. Thudimir laughed with an edge. Come on, Valimir. I can't forget her. She was beautiful, so still on that bed. Her green eyes, enormous with fear, have stayed with me. Enough. She's not for you. She sleeps. That bastard Julia killed her son, and I'd promised to protect the boy. What's one brat left? Less. You've grown soft. Helena's heart beat with renewed vigor, outrage forcing her to feel again. She longed to punish Thudimir's contempt with her dagger. Thudimir's voice became smooth, honeyed with persuasion. Valimir, let me have her. You never keep foreign women. You told me again and again that they can't be trusted. But something about this one touches me. She's with me. If you bother her, I'll beat you so you can't sit a horse. Thudimir laughed. Do you think you could? I know it. Well, when you tire of her, and you will, I won't mind being second. Like others I could name, you're not a spoiler of women. We could split the gold when we sell her. With her aristocratic air, she'll fetch a good price more than a fine stallion. Speak of other things or leave. Thudimir laughed, but with a nervous edge. You like her. I don't understand. You never take women as hostages. Why this one? Did you notice her resemblance to our mother? I thought you'd forgotten how she looked, Bevian. I lied. I remember what I wish. This woman's not mother. Your little prize won't care for you. She's bounty good for one thing only. Go. I won't say it twice. Put down your fist, Thudimir said. I'm off, but watch out. Attila may not be so easily put off. She has that delicate look he favors. He'll want her with or without permission. You know how he is about women. Get her pregnant, then he might respect your rights to her. If you keep her hidden until she shows. With a malicious chuckle, he mounted with a leap, making his horse grunt at the impact. When the horse struck off at a gallop, Helena breathed with an involuntary relief. Thudimir's words had forced her thoughts beyond her perimeters of her sorrow. Outside, Valimir muttered under his breath, Damn him, he's right. Attila will plague me day and night until he gets what he wants. Helena heard camp sounds, shouts, and horses approaching in the distance, but nothing from Valimir. Then he spoke with finality. Well, he won't have her. The words made their way to her heart. He swept open the tip flap and strode inside, filling the space with his presence. Halting in mid-motion, he saw that she was awake. He sat across from her, at a loss. She pulled herself to a seating position. Her movements were cautious from pain. How much did you hear? She tried to answer him, but could not speak. When Valimir was near, her fragile self-control crumbled. Talk to me, Helena. Her eyes met his, but she could not hold his gaze. She stared at the ground, fighting for composure. Most women will be grateful to you for saving their lives, but I'm not. I should have died today, but then you would be cheated of your reward. The ransom's not important. I've wealth enough. Then why did you bother to look for me? She knew that she was being offensive, but she did not care. The story was intriguing. Karatapan, being Persian, had heard it. I doubt that anyone else knows. When our leader, Attila, asked me to accompany him on this campaign, I agreed. but always kept myself open for a girl about 18, answering to the name of Helena with green eyes and soft brown hair, lost with her grandfather on the silk routes en route to Persia. Oh. She was quiet for a moment and looked directly at him. You brought Mikhail's death. There's nothing left for me. You feel that way now, he said, but life changes. It's never simple. You walk the earth, never knowing what your path will lead you, where your path will lead you. Don't doubt that you have a higher purpose. You're a philosopher, yet for one who thinks your company is strange. Valimir laughed wryly. Your perception is astute. Yes, I've seen much. His blue eyes assessed her somberly. I did not intend for your son to be killed. Then why do you ride with Huns? 5 years I've dreamed of escape. You've turned my hopes into ashes. A mockery of what could have been. We're a conquered people. For 50 years Ostrogoths have watched and waited, shaping the Huns in our ways. I do what I must. But for Ivan, the village would stand. Grilia would have had no excuse for a massacre. Mikhail's blood will be Grilia's death. Put it behind you, Helena. Even I think twice before challenging him. His expertise with arms is unique. I don't know how or when, but he will die, settling his debt with me. And the earth herself will be cleaner when he no longer fouls the earth with his breath. How is it you, a well-born girl from Constantinople, can pledge revenge with such ease? Helena was silent. When she did speak, it was to escape the void that had become her heart, not from a desire to share. My father is Persian, but my mother was Thracian, descended from Celts. She died at my birth, but her blood sings for vengeance. Valimir was silent, his face thoughtful. My mother was Thracian. His statement crept under her defenses, forcing her to see him as human, making it difficult to take pleasure in his ancient sorrow. Resisting their common bond, she winced, but spoke with gentleness. In another life, under different circumstances, I would have sympathized for your loss. But now, you do better to send me to my son. I cannot bring good to anyone, least of all myself. He moved closer, spicy with sweat. Yet his smell did not revolt her. Placing his lips next to her ear, he whispered, You're wrong. Already you've renewed me. She whispered no, but did not pull away. His earnest declaration only intensifies her distress. Confronting her eyes so close to tears, she felt an unexpected affinity, as before, a lifetime ago in Kansbar's house. She held his gaze, experiencing the moment of rapport. With irony, Helena recognized that with Valimir, a barbarian, she had shed her protective, womanly mask. She looked away, breaking contact, and ran from their connection with a volley of words. If Grilia is such a formidable opponent, why did you put yourself at risk for me? It would have killed you. Her inner turmoil increased. She changed the subject. The sun is high. Did Karatapen find enough wood for the pyre? All is arranged. You have but to set the flame. She closed her eyes, feeling both relief and impatience. All of his talk had wasted precious time. Mikhail waited. Thank you. For this I'm grateful. Please take me to my son. After you eat something. It's better to fast. Helena frowned. Valimir frowned. Had your son died peacefully, I'd agree. But you're not well, Helena. How can you ride, much less even walk in your condition? Eat. The food will lend you strength. For a moment, Helena sat motionless. She picked up the meat with her uninjured hand. It was stringy. Forcing herself, she swallowed 4 or 5 bites and then put down the rest. Without a word, Valimir picked up a small cup she had dropped and replenished it from a leather flask. Drink, he said. She drank it all. The meat had been salty. Feeling less lethargic, she spoke slowly. I must be clean. Is there a place where I can wash? We'll cross the stream on our way. Stepping forward with resolution, Helena's leg cramped with spasm. She felt cold all over. The air buzzed around her ears. She stumbled. Silently, Valimir gently took her in his arms and carried her outside. His horse was waiting, bridled and saddled. Valimir, Thudimir said. He was mounted, his arms crossed, his animal occupied at the grass. His posture was relaxed, indicating he had endured a boring wait. Thudimir jerked his horse's head up and walked toward them. He halted within an arm's length. Valimir's face flushed with anger. Ignoring his brother's reaction, Thudimir spoke in crisp Greek. I came to introduce myself, but to my regret, I don't speak her language. Unlike you, dear brother, I never had luck with foreign words. Will you translate for me?" Speech was distinct. The smell of mead was heavy on his breath and clothes. He looked at Helena with lewd insolence. Her cheeks grew hot with indignation. She stared at him, enunciating her words clearly in Greek. "Have you no respect for your brother? You gawk at his guest like a rude boor. Am I not in his presence?" Sudimir's mouth dropped with surprise. "She speaks Greek." "Why didn't you tell me, Valamir? And how she speaks, like a noble born. Some day I might tell you her story, but not now." Turning from his brother, Valamir placed Helena on his horse, mounting behind her. "Share with me. You know I can't stand a mystery, which explains why you have yet to be an initiate of Mithras." Sudimir moved his horse in front of Valamir's, blocking the way. His blue eyes were narrow, his head cocked to one side. "You won't dismiss me." Helena felt Valamir tense behind her, preparing himself for a fight. She had no patience with their quarrel. Mikhail was ready for his journey. "Your brother has arranged the final rites for my son. We must go to him. Please understand that this is a private moment." Sudimir stopped blustering, nonplussed. Her words had been quiet, yet dignified. Backing his horse, he cleared the way for them. His smile was not pleasant. He bowed mockingly. "My apologies." Without further conversation, he cantered his bay in the opposite direction. Despite his inebriation, his back was straight, and he sat his mount well. Valamir headed north, the camp behind them. He made no comment about his brother's behavior or Helena's intervention. Soon they came to a small brook, bordered by a wide sandy bed. Bringing his horse to a halt, he dismounted, lifting Helena off. "I'll wait while you wash." The bright sun was past its zenith well into the afternoon, yet even in October it had the power to warm. The creek meandered toward the distant Aral Sea. Though the water was low, the current was steady. Kneeling beside it, Helena remembered other times. Before the birth of Mikhail, she had found a secluded spot downstream and made it her own. Today the water burbled happily over the rocks, in direct contrast to her misery. No matter where she went, the darkness followed her like a specter. She washed her face with the cold water until it was clean. Then she splashed her arms and neck. With effort, she forced her body to stand. "You're wet. The chill will drain your strength," Valamir said. "It doesn't matter. I do what I must." Remounting, Valamir allowed his horse to pick its way across the stream, avoiding the larger rocks. Then he urged the animal into a gallop. The wind tightened her wet cheeks with cold. She welcomed the discomfort as a proper observance of grief. In the distance, she saw the pyre. She wanted to join Mikhail once the flames burned high. Her grandfather's voice seemed to whisper that suicide was immoral, giving ultimate victory to the evil one. As a child, these words had made perfect sense. Now they worried her. Twice in 5 years, her life had been destroyed, shattering her will to begin anew. Though her need for revenge sustained her, it could not fill the void. As they neared, Karatapan greeted them, waving a wooden torch. He had tethered his horse 100 paces away, well out of reach of any sparks. Valamir took her by the hand, leading her to Mikhail's body. It lay on a lattice litter, waiting for the pyre. As she stood over the remains, he stayed close, but stepped back a pace or two. Someone had put the severed neck together, hiding the butchery with a wide scarf. Mikhail's hair was combed, his face clean. His expression was dreadful, distended with rigidity. Helena touched his cheek gently, saddening that she had been unable to cleanse him. Stroking his hair, her tears dropped on his tunic. Careful not to disturb the fragile alignment of his body, she straightened his tunic and laid her hand across his torso. It was as cold as the wind around her. She spoke to him softly in Persian. "My sweet Mikhail, I'll miss you each day of my life. I long for you. You've been wrenched from me, leaving me bereft. You were all that was good, bringing the light back into my life. Without you, I'm in darkness. I say goodbye to your body, but not your spirit. As long as I walk the earth, you'll be with me, at least in my heart. Remember me. Be with me, Mikhail. My choice was death, but I am here without you. I will love you always. She bent over him, kissing his forehead lightly, not disturbing the illusion of unity. Stepping back, she spoke to Valimir. Let the flames take him. Through a film of tears, she saw Valimir nod to Karatapan. They picked up the wooden stretcher and placed it on top of the mound. Mikhail's head lolled to one side, breaking the mirage of entirety. She sobbed. Karatapan handed the blazing torch to Helena, placing it securely in her left hand. She stared at it transfixed, unable to move. The old man talked to her quietly in Persian, the sounds humming in her ears like musical notes. Though his accent was clumsy from disuse, the sincerity of his words spoke to her heart. Child of light, do not be deceived. Your son's death is a cruel trick by the evil one. Do not allow him to turn you from your path. The wise Lord did not call for the sacrifice of your child. Nay, it is his enemy, jealous of what is pure and good, who has brought you to this desolation. Trust in the goodness of the one God, Ahura Mazda. Not his enemy, Angra Mainyo, the liar, though he could not save your son. He has given you a true friend in my master. Unknowingly, Valimir is in service to the wise Lord, God of all creation. Take this torch, pure with fire, and send your child to Ahura Mazda. Do it with joy in your heart, serene in the knowledge that you have given him a new life with the one God. Helena felt a glimmering of solace and bowed her head. Thank you, she whispered in their common language. She walked slowly around the pyre, touching the lit torch in many places. Once the fire ignited, she tossed the stake into the inferno, wishing for the courage to follow it. Instead, she wept. For the first time, the tears brought relief. Valimir pulled her from the intense heat, keeping his hands on her shoulders. Together they watched the blaze burn brightly within the circle of stones, lingering as the sun streaked the sky with golden blue. Keeping vigil, the three remained until Mikhail's bones were covered with ash. A few embers glistened. It is done, Helena said. Now the wind will take him to the corners of the earth, and that is good. Exhausted, she sank to the ground. What remained of her strength was spent. She became aware of her injuries. When Valimir lifted her, she was almost grateful for his help. And that's chapter 5. I'm going to check the Facebook author page, although I don't know what's, let's see if I have to check and see if we have anything. So, it's loading up. Right now I'm multi-streaming the caster. And thank you. 9 people. I've reached 9 people. It's very good. So thanks for following me. I'll be back next week. It's like New Jersey is beginning to open up a little bit more, which is really terrific. But Phoenix and the Falcon, you can get your own copy on Amazon. I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.